Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks. Welcome to Karate Web Belts. I am John, and I am joined by the illustrious
Jeremy, yeah, I'm back again. So
back again. How are we feeling this week, Jeremy?
not too bad. Just been really busy. So
Right on, right on. More Ozark landlording.
yeah, I mean, um, yeah, critters are starting to come out of the woodwork. I had either a mouse or a rat or chipmunk get up into one of my air conditioning units and eat all the wiring out of it. So had to get that repaired. You know, for some reason, some you know, renters don't like to. Go into a house with no air conditioning when it's like 98 degrees and 150% humidity. So it's yeah, that was an unexpected expense, but I'll
Delicious.
take it over a new compressor. So yeah,
Well, have you been able to use the raccoon harpoon much lately?
no raccoon harpoons yet. So haven't haven't had to do that. Haven't had to chase any raccoons off. It's either foxes or mice or chipmunks lately. So it's like, come on. Yeah.
Throw a sigh or two at him.
I'm thinking about like an M80, something like that. That sounds pretty good.
Of course. One of us is
Yeah.
broadcasting from a small island in South Japan. One of us is broadcasting from heartland of America.
Hey,
Guess
just
which
a
one
fun,
can get their hands on a rifle? Answer both.
hey, just a fun fact. I mean, Missouri is the leading leading state slash territory for fireworks and explosions. So it's kind of
Well, what's funny is everyone says like, "There's no guns in Japan. There's no guns in Japan." Not true. You
yeah,
can get hunting. You can get hunting guns because we have wild boar and other like wild animals and stuff. You can go after. The rules around it are much more strict, but yeah, it's a thing here.
yeah, it's not here. So
Yeah, no, I wouldn't
it's all
imagine.
it's all
Too
good.
too much money. What's been going on with training with you lately?
It's been slow, but I mean, getting back into it after the hamstring pull. So it's been going pretty good. Working more isometric stuff. Working on katas, doing like slow stretching while I'm doing katas. It's kind of a different way to train kata, but I mean, it's still good. So
You can never underestimate the isometric work within kata. I think a
no,
lot of people want to kind of blast through a kata or whatever, but you can never underestimate that type of work.
I tell you what, I get more power out of doing it from isometrics than I do trying to blast through something. So
It's a shame that people don't really get into that much in terms of kata training. I myself am guilty of not spending a lot of time on that because I normally when I do a kata set or I'll do like some kata, I'll normally want to try to drill something,
yeah,
but I gotta because I'm losing space unfortunately within the next couple weeks from a move. I'm gonna have to learn to do that a little more. Plus snow.
hey, snow training's good.
No training isometric kata.
Well, I mean, I, isometric kata in the snow goes a little bit faster, so I was just kind of just saying.
There you go. Yeah, yesterday I did a 13K, about 8 mile run, and then this morning the whole town had to get up. I got up at 4:30. Everyone else got up at 8 to do basically town cleaning. So everyone in the town gets up and goes and weeds and gardens and gets all the excess stuff up. Like, and this happens every 3 months or whatever.
Hmm,
So
interesting.
early, well, and it gets, everyone just does their part and they don't have to worry about it for like 3 months after that.
That's cool.
Yeah. Everyone gets free water and whatnot. So better than, having a supposed professional crew do it like every other week or whatever. And then that's just more stuff you have to pay for rather than, buy some water and get a couple trucks together for, a couple hours and a couple days out of the year.
No, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm actually kind of beat from that. I guess one thing we can go on from in continuity of our recording. I'm going to keep this in continuity. So we're gonna have a couple different recordings coming up this week. So keep my own head on straight. We had mentioned briefly last week. You had mentioned briefly last week a difference you noticed when you guys had moved from a less than up to code building, let's say,
Yeah, that's one way to put
to a nicer venue, to a hotel, to do camps, to do seminars,
it. Yeah,
to get a bunch of people together in an organization. And though I think the decision making behind that is sound, I think you had brought up there was something lost in the middle there. And you had brought up to me that this would actually be a great idea to tackle today. And I think both in terms of not only a wider seminar format, but also in terms of, well, how does this affect your everyday training, and how does this affect both as a community. So I guess let's dive into that topic,
yeah,
because there's no one answer to it, I feel. But I feel that this is kind of the worm in the apple, that it goes in a couple different directions. To start off, let's look at it from a training perspective. We're just talking about karate. What are our needs?
true. Really, all you really need is just basically a designated space. And what I mean by designated, it doesn't have to be like a separate place, but just some place where you agree with whoever you're training with, or even yourself, that this is where you're going to train.
There's a very specific mental aspect to that. Because if you try to train in front of the TV, you can mentally train yourself to be like, all right, Cheers is on. Time to start doing Nahachi Shodan.
Yeah.
For those who in our audience who know what Cheers is. So
Sorry, I grew up with Cheers and Night Court and all those. So, yeah.
I would be better off with doing it in front of Night Court.
That's beside the point. But in kind of one of the things that I brought up while we were talking earlier is I think it's just kind of natural for martial artists in general, not just people in karate, but just in general, to continually look how to do something better or how to make something better.
Right.
And
It's literally the history of it.
and I think sometimes when we think this is good, more is better, well, maybe it's not. Or look at it from a different perspective. Does it allow you to understand things better, quicker, faster, as opposed to the other way? And so that's kind of something that I've been, I don't know, really diving in mentally, thinking about after our last podcast. I really thought about this. I wouldn't say it's a conflict, but it's like I remember, some of the seminars you go to, and you're at a hotel setting, you have hotel rooms, you've got a lot of distractions from training as opposed to just out in the middle of a field. And you're just doing outside blocks for 45 minutes to an hour. That's all you're doing. You're just doing this. Is it better to do one or the other?
It's interesting you bring that point up, because I've also been in a situation where we were stuck out in the middle of nowhere and it felt like less training got done. But that was more from an organizational perspective. But if we're talking from a seminar perspective, from a getting everybody together and doing stuff, and that can be based on who's running it and whatnot.
Right.
And I feel that I've also been in the hotel arena and had the exact opposite experience, where that was actually, I feel, one of the better training weekends I'd ever had, is where we would get up 8 o'clock in the morning, 3 hour session, break for a little, 3 hour session, break for a little, 3 hour session, break for dinner. Maybe we were just chilling in the hotel lobby or whatever, and then shooting the shit, working on stuff.
Yeah.
I've heard of legends of people doing kumite within the hotel rooms. Maybe there was a little alcohol involved in there, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
never a smart thing to involve
No,
those two.
no, 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 no. Yeah.
I don't think you're alone in this thought. But to try to help you articulate it, or try to articulate it in a way that might be more general, is that you have the center focus idea. You don't have anything else around you. You don't have any distractions, out of either a lack or a need. as opposed to, having resources
Mm-hmm.
financially, or generally it's just financially, and having the resources to do the things that you want.
Yeah.
Right. So a great example would be, I remember one school friend of ours, they wanted mats for the longest time. Tried to raise money for mats. Tried to get money together for mats. They wanted mats. They wanted to do rolls. They wanted to do throws and stuff like that. They were just a traditional karate school,
Mm-hmm.
and just stuff kept coming up until the point where school had to close. But their whole goal was just getting mats, as opposed to another school I had been a part of where they had mats. They had two floors where you could do classes. One floor was just matted with those like big blue foam mats that you can't really move all that well. You just like
Yeah.
put them down and they're connected together.
Yeah.
And they had like kind of stereotypical gym mats from the bottom floor that they could pull out and do throws on. How very little of these mats were actually utilized or even found even necessary in that school was so meager. So I feel that this is a conversation just also about resources than anything else, and then addressing wants and needs.
Well, I mean, it's interesting you bring something like that up. I think of, people who kind of a example would be like, oh, I need a new car. I need a new car. Why do you need a car? Need a new car? Oh, well, I like to be able to use Sirius XM or this or that or whatever else. Or I like the little cameras that it has on it, or I like the fact I can play Mario Kart on the dashboard or whatever, whatever. Why do you really need it? Is it a need or is it more of a want? And, it gets back to training. I mean, do you really need that hotel setting? Do you really need a convention center to go through training and stuff?
Do you need
Maybe,
mats?
yeah, do you really need mats? And even if you got them, how much would you be utilizing them?
I can see the real want to use mats to put more throws and groundwork into what you're doing. If there's
Right.
legitimate reason for
Oh,
doing that,
ab-
100%, and
oh,
you
absolutely.
don't want to screw people up and whatever, and having mats, they tend to be easier to clean. They tend to be easier to, break apart and put back together.
But
I get it.
are you actually going to use them? That's the thing.
And that's when, if somebody says, well, are you really going to use them? That means they have more resources. It's also like, it also goes to knowledge, right? So we're talking about, if we're talking about the people who are on the floor who are running, they need to know what they're doing. An idea that I had seen that happened to me was the instructor wanted us to get these fingerless mitts, these like white fingerless mitts that had like foam over the knuckles. They
Oh yeah,
really weren't useful. Like, we never used them. And in
yeah,
fact, no one used. I barely ever saw anybody use. But he required everybody needs to buy these. Everybody needs to get these because these are going to be important for class. Year later, maybe used them once.
you know,
Now, if I want to give this guy the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to say he had an idea, he didn't follow through with. I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to say he just ripped everybody for about 15 to 20 bucks.
yeah. Well, I remember going into a school long. It's been a long time ago. Went into a school and they literally had an entire wall full of Suburitos. I mean, like wow, you guys must really train hard with these. They're like, no, we've never used them. I mean, and I'm like, well, why do you have them? Well, they say they're great training tools, but we don't know how to use them. I'm like, well, pick them up. I'm going to show you how to use them right now. They're just like, really? I'm like, yeah. And so it's like, it's almost like you got the cart before the horse. Sometimes you need the cart before the horse, but I don't know.
Sometimes you need a horse, and you don't know how to ride the horse, so you need to put the cart on so you actually have something to sit in.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily a one or the other type deal in that regard, but it's like the going back to just the space issue, people struggle these days to get space.
yeah,
It used to not be a huge issue, but now with real estate being the way it is, at least in the States, people struggle with that. And this is why you get a lot of community centers that come together and stuff like that. I
hmm
feel you can get just enough good training in those spaces as you could in the backyard. Backyard park type training. I mean, that's limited because of space and whatnot. I think you can get the quality of whatever you're trying to do done. But if you need specific equipment, that's a different deal. But if you're
Right.
walking into a school like that, where you have just a bunch of Suburito or Boken on the wall, and literally no one knows how to use them, that means the people who got them. I'm assuming those were just the schools Suburito.
Yeah, yeah, it was just a school, and nobody had ever shown them how to use it. It's like,
I think I know. I know what you're talking about.
no, I mean this was long,
Oh,
long,
okay.
long, 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 long time ago. Long
Oh,
time.
okay. That's even worse. Makes a little more sense because people are also stupid with money. Uh,
Well, there were times. I mean, I've got one training tool that I might have thrown it away finally. I just got tired of looking at it, and it looked like. I mean, there are some people that know how to use it, but it was a heavy weighted tonbo, and you did all these exercises with this thing. But to get anybody to teach you anything out on this, everybody was very confused with it. Like, well, I don't know. Well, I mean, and I ended up knowing like two exercises with it, and I'm like, you know, I can do this with a regular tonbo, and maybe the extra weight is nice, but who cares, And there were a couple things I got out of it, but for the most part, you try to teach somebody to use it, even with those little exercises, and they'd work with it about 2 or 3 minutes. Like, man, this thing's heavy. I don't want to work with this anymore. So what's the point, But I mean, it goes back to as you're training and you're trying to improve yourself, is there a certain point where if you're trying to improve yourself, you're actually hurting yourself?
well, and it's like progress in the wrong direction, and also defeated by victory in that regard. Because okay, think of all of the time and money it is to get to those things. Weighted
Yeah.
combo, a nice place to train, students to train with, or people to train with, right? But the $15-$20 little white fingerless mitts.
Yeah.
If you're at the point of being able to do that, but then you have an idea of what to do with them, then yeah, you're kind of defeated by your own resources. You're over resourced but under knowledged. But also it's like if you're in a school where you have the Subarito on the wall, but we never use them, that's a problem. And I think that's an issue of both the teacher or the students or whatever malaise has fallen over the school. And
Well,
this happens. This happens a lot.
yeah. And I mean, you get back to, okay, I don't have the equipment, but I'm ready to learn this stuff. So that's a problem.
Right.
And then you have the other problem where I have the equipment, nobody's willing to teach it to me. That's another problem,
Too much
It-
in two directions, or it's the wrong things in two directions.
right. And I mean, nothing's ever just in time that works perfectly. And I get it, And sometimes you get the resources ahead of time, and I get it. But the one with the Subarito, I mean, there was dust on the Subarito. So they they were there for a while. It wasn't like it was like, okay, last week we got this, and we're hoping to get training on it. But I mean, they'd been there a while.
Well, and then it goes kind of into the sparring conversation I had with Rahul a couple, it's over a year ago, is that people get complacent. They don't have the right people around them. So it's either the students or the teachers, and it's both. They just kind of take the easy way out. They don't know how to, to get back into something. And I think part of it is you don't have the need there anymore. You don't have that desire to do something. You've lost that desire to do something, right?
Yeah, that brings up a really good point. I'm going to kind of give a very interesting example.
Go right
And
ahead.
I was listening to an interview by the lead singer of Metallica. It was 2, 3 weeks ago, And so I mean, now the other thing is, if you really want to train really, really hard, play some Metallica while you're training. I'm telling you, you're going to really up that intensity like 200-fold. I'm telling you. But anyway, that's beside the point. But what he
I
was,
will not pay for licensed Metallica music at the end of this podcast. Jeremy, you're fronting me that money if you want me to do that.
no, I mean, each person take care of that yourself. No. But anyway, but one of the things he mentioned was he has problems going out on stage because back in the 80s and 90s it was like everybody was against him, so they had this massive attitude to try to make it. And he goes, then they hit that one album and they said, yeah, we were successful before that, but we just went through, I mean, it was just through the roof. And that anger and that drive to drive you to get to that point kind of stops, and you don't know how to funnel it. And I think that's very true with your training. I think once you hit a certain point, I think that drive that drives you to, whether it's hit a certain rank, learn a certain weapon, learn certain techniques, learn whatever it is you're really driving to learn, it somewhat, once you learn it, sometimes that part goes away. And I think that gets to a point also with your training facilities, training partners, how you train, different things like that. So I mean, it's just kind of an analogy I'm kind of seeing. So
Well, you're absolutely right. And I think this is also where, when a little bit we were talking about the history of and then kind of the cycles of karate, I think this is something that killed karate to a large degree. Because you have a lot of people who aren't hungry anymore. You have a lot of people who are like well off. Some people have said, like philosophy, martial arts is for the wealthy. And when you have the people who are not so well off, they tend to try to work harder. They get hungrier. They try to go towards a thing harder. They don't know something. They want to know. You don't work harder more than when you want something, right? Than when you're kind of striving for it, even to a degree need it.
yeah,
Which is sad when people lose that interest in that and get into that complacency. Complacency.
yeah,
Fact check me on the pronunciation. But I think one way to kind of get around that is just to have some time to kind of recultivate training. Even if you have a really nice school, or even if you have a really, you know, only four walls and maybe a roof, you need to be able to dig back in and see, oh, what about this was important? What about this is important? What is? And in recent years I've asked myself this question because of just trying to start schools, trying to figure out how to run a program, and then trying to pitch it to people, and even in my own training. And it's, what do I need? What do I don't need? What's necessary? What's not necessary? And time in life has shown me again and again that space can get cut, but the training can't. People can't get cut, but you can't cut what you do with people.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Where you find that point and then correct for that, as it were, is, I think, anyone's guess in terms of what you actually have and what you have around you.
Well, I think each person's different.
Right.
It can be anything. I got a buddy of mine I went to college with. I mean, he got into the MMA circuits and all that kind of stuff. It got to the point where he hit a wall. He was basically one fight away from going into the UFC, and he hit a wall. And once he lost, it was just like he lost his drive to compete in it again, and he lost his drive to teach, and he lost a lot of that. So he had to really reinvent himself.
I
From
think
I mean, from what he really wanted out of everything. So
I think those moments are harder to come by when people aren't competitive, especially when you're kind of sitting on a school or you're sitting on a program or just have people coming for lessons and whatnot or just
yeah,
training on your. But that moment is better to come by. I feel in that situation. It's also harder to come by when you can't when you're missing a goal, when you're missing something that you want to do and you want to achieve. And it's that lack of goal, it's that lack of wanting to make something better through what you're doing. I mean,
yeah,
it's just sad because just thinking about your school you're talking about with the Super Eat though, build up your students in a much different way if you had just integrated that as even a 5 minute thing you do every night, right?
yeah,
As
absolutely.
as opposed to just it's something that's dusty on the wall. I remember my first experience getting a tonfa off a wall and then going back to the school that I normally trained in, and I grabbed the tonfa and the handle fell off because nobody had picked it up for like 15 years or like 5 6 years or whatever, right?
Yeah,
And just the first time I'd actually really gotten into Kobudo beyond our niece, and I was like, wow. For years and years and years, I saw weapons on the wall, and I had the same experience. For years, I saw bows and sai and kama and tumfa on the wall. Never saw anyone demonstrate anything with them. Never saw anybody do anything with them. They were off limits. And then to suddenly like walk into a place where everyone this is all flying off the walls.
yeah,
It makes you feel like you actually can do something.
yeah,
And then maybe you can create a goal from that and do something from that. If you don't have that, I remember the moment I started putting weapons in people's hands, or started putting a glove on people's hands and having them do. Like, I'm not a great sparring guy. I will admit that very, very plainly. I'm not a great sparring guy. I had one student before I left the States, and she, when we had the gloves and mitts and stuff like that, she really got into it. I kind of just figured out a couple things from karate, what we could do with them.
yeah,
But I was never the boxing guy. I was never the sparring guy. And this woman who had like a pretty bad physical ailment found empowerment in using those gloves. And never, I don't want to say it's in the way that you use it, but it's in the way that you frame it and how you make it more, you just make it available. Just make it something you can do.
yeah.
And I didn't have a place. We were just doing this in somebody's house. Her kid was
No,
on the couch watching SpongeBob while we were doing this.
I guess that's better than Beavis and Butthead. But anyway, that's beside the point.
Not only did we make a night court reference, we also made a Beavis and Butthead reference. We are hitting goals in this podcast today, Jeremy.
Tell you what. Oh, oh man. But
I guess as maybe a way to think about what's a good way of getting out of this rut position, people who have too much than they know what to do with. And then how do you go from being somebody who has a need to being able to get to those goals and not get into that rut? Because it's kind of in three different parts if you think of it that way.
I mean, that's kind of $1 million question. I don't have a real good answer for it, other than you really have to put. I don't know if I'd say discipline. I'd say, I, I guess one way to put it would be policies and practice. Have some type of routine to make sure that you're always looking at that. That's the only thing I can almost like another guiding principle or something, to where you're really looking at that every single day, week, month, year. I mean, to say that I haven't fallen victim to that, yep, sure have. Absolutely, I've fallen victim to that. But I think it's definitely something interesting. I think part of this podcast is talking through it so that I don't fall into it again.
Well, yeah, and I think the idea here is that we think about coming from the place of need. Harder to give advice to in this regard, or harder to even talk about a way of getting out of that, other than saying, do the things you need to do to get to where you need.
Yeah.
Whether that's getting to that space that you want or making do with what you have. Because you can do a lot with a little, but
Yeah.
we have the opposite end of doing little with a lot.
And I think the other thing is change the mindset from strictly goal oriented, which there's nothing wrong with goals, to more journey oriented, to where it's like, yeah, you want to set goals, you want to set certain things that you definitely want to get out of things and stuff like that. Get it, got it. But look at it more from a journey perspective, because how many people do you know, like, they train. I mean, they'll bust their rump to get to Shodan. I got my black belt. As soon as they get their black belt and their
Bye
certificate,
bye.
yeah, it's like they went in the FBI witness protection program. You never see these people again, ever.
Right, and I think that's an obvious one, especially on this podcast, which is kind of like, yeah, I mean, it's a great thing, but it's at the end of the day, this is kind of what ends up happening. But I think even beyond that, like, you're right in saying you always have to renew the journey. You have to go home. You have to kind of re-look at it.
There's always a new journey.
There's always a new road to go down, and I think you're not every road is going to have the same experience. But then also it's like, once you go down different roads, you figure out, well, okay, what if I go back down this road, but I do it in a different way? Or what if I do it better this time around? What if I figure out a better way to utilize lessons that I have? Right? Like if I
Yeah.
had done, I can't imagine what it would have been like if I had just done the version of Kobudo that I had seen at that school that literally had a tonfa fall off the handle. But if I had not had our niece prior to that, I don't know what my experience with Kobudo would have been, what my view of Kobudo would have been.
Yeah.
But I went down one road and then went into another with the kind of the Kobudo that we're experienced with.
Yeah.
And now I go back down and see other stuff, and I'm like, oh, I can kind of apply both to that. And that's just from a learning perspective. I remember it's from which something we probably are going to have to talk about sometimes, our experiences opening and closing schools and programs.
Well, yeah. I don't really want to talk
I keep on baiting Jeremy to get on this topic with me, and he's like,
I don't want to talk.
um,
We don't talk about that.
we will for content, damn it. Make it a Patreon all exclusive only thing. But from a program perspective, it's like, okay, what can we do? Teaching perspective. All right, didn't work out. Why didn't work out? And then like, okay, well, this time it'll be different. This year it'll be different. This is a different class. This is a different group of people. And you're right in saying if we look at it from that journey perspective, not just the goal perspective, but you're right in saying the goals are great, but that perspective is limited. We can get to a much better place with just how we look at martial arts, how we look at the journey of karate. I'm a little afraid of saying that because there's a different guy who uses this as a trademark or whatever. So
Yeah, no, we're not getting into that. I mean, it's just I think it's mainly.
we can start karaoke. Don't stop believing that.
Man, you don't want me doing karaoke. Holy cow! Unless you want to laugh or cry, one of the two. I think it is in the way that we teach, because I think a lot of, now that I really think about it, you look at instruction today. Oh, you have to meet these guidelines. You have to meet these guidelines. Have to meet these guidelines. Have to meet these guidelines. Well, who gives a crap about the damn guidelines? I mean,
He was making guide.
there are certain things you definitely have to learn along the way. I get it. I go back to, I don't know. I've really looked at some of this, and with my rental properties. Sorry, I'm going off tangent, but I go back to what Robert Kiyosaki said, that in his book. It's like, why do people worry about performing at the minimum instead of trying to figure out what the maximum they can get out of it? And I think that gets into, and here's my point on this. You have, how many times have you been in class? Somebody will say, do Nahashi Shodan. And the first thing that comes out of somebody's mouth, how many times do you want us to do it? And usually the instructor falls in a trap. I'm guilty of this too. Do that 5 times, whatever. Instead of do it until I tell you not to do it anymore. How's that? And there's a difference. I think that's I think that's a lesson that we can really pick up on. I think that'll drive going more towards a journey as opposed to a goal. And I think when you say, "Oh, do it 5 times," that's a goal. If you do it so many times, do as many times you can do it, and I'll tell you when to stop. What are you going to get out of that? Don't know.
I remember one time, not that it wasn't really the amount of times, but it was just changing people's orientation slightly, just making people like because they were so focused on one end of the room or
Oh,
the other end of the room. It was just getting them to do it in corners, getting them to realign themselves on angles and stuff like that.
you
And it's
talking
just
about
like, all right,
you talking
it,
about you talking about
eh,
that?
no,
Huh?
different time,
Different
different
time? Okay.
different thing. But it was me and a friend of ours kind of got that to happen, and with a rather longer exercise, and we made the class sit through it, and it was only 4 times. It wasn't that long. It was only 4 times, but it was just this. The class was just like, what were we doing? And I was just like, there's something different,
Hmm.
and just that kind of shake up there, because that was a place where we had more than we needed and didn't know what to do with it, and just rush through the curriculum without focusing on just your bare basics in that regard. That was one thing I felt that was at least helpful to that time. I mean, the one thing I can say for the people who are in kind of the need section of all of this is that keep focused on those basics and keep raising the standard for yourself, at least in the training, because as long as that's maintained, then you're fine. Go to Planet Fitness. Planet Fitness is, or like whatever, these like cheapo gyms that are open these days, and
Yeah.
at least it's a space you can go to do stuff. Pretty much whatever time. It's not like the greatest place in the world, sure, and then you get your broceps there at like December and January and whatever. To those who are in too much want and not enough need, I would say you have to shake yourself to reevaluate where you're at, because especially if you have people under you or around you or depending on you or whatever, um, you are not doing them a service by not knowing where you are and not knowing where they're at. And this really got me thinking this week, some little separate. I was thinking about this with just teaching, because I do it as a profession. If you walk into a classroom and you don't know what you want to do, find out what you need to do,
Yeah.
because I've seen neither happen and nothing get done, and it's
True.
so sad. So don't be that person who walks into a space with people and don't maybe you don't know what they need. Maybe you don't know what you want. But the most important sense you can gain out of not only being a teacher but being somebody who's, you know, a good demonstration of your abilities is your ability to understand what's going on with others around you. And that's a great demonstration of your abilities by understanding them. I
Yeah.
know that's maybe a little off the way from
Yeah.
I
I
wanted to
mean,
point that out.
personally, I think this is a good place to wrap it up because, and I'll end on this quote. And this comes from Robbie. And I remember he asked me one time. He goes, "What do you think the mission of my school really is?" And I was young and stupid and didn't really quite grasp what he was really asking. And he said, "This is my mission from my heart. And that is when somebody walks through that door, they are better off when they walk out of it than when they walked in. Plain and simple." And so I think that's to each of us. We need to find that simplicity that speaks volumes to us to move forward.
And to keep that always renewed.
Yeah,
Right. You can't all
absolutely.
you and it's tough to do that. It's not easy. We're not we're not sitting here saying it is. It's
No,
hard for it's just as hard for us. We're just kind of pointing it out. We're two dudes just kind of saying, "Hey, this is the thing."
that's why I wanted to bring the topic up.
Yeah,
I mean, and, and I'm going to invite anybody and everybody to comment on this because you know what, I I want other ideas than what I've got. I don't know the answer to it, but I'm bringing it up, and this is kind of my thoughts. But I want more input. I'd love to hear other people because I'm not an expert on it by any means.
definitely. And I think we can all share like different ideas, building general community around this.
Yeah,
Hopefully, within the next year or so, we can get more of that going. But God knows where we'll be with all this nonsense that's going on.
yep. So
Cool.
cool.
Jeremy, thank you for that. I actually do really appreciate you broaching that topic.
Yeah, I think it's something we struggle with, and sometimes we don't even put a finger on what's going on, and it is what's going on.
So, Jeremy, what are you working on this week? More isometric kata.
Yeah, I really am. I think I'm going to move more into isometric weaponry this week. More psi, manji, psi. As much isometric as you can with those, but you can do more isometrics with psi than you can with manji psi, obviously. But
Be an interesting approach to be like Manjusai, isometrics through each and
yeah,
every turn on the side. You stop and you kind of that would be pretty. That would be stretching out those muscles in your forearms to pretty much the extent they could be.
well, some of the spins on those you just can't. You just can't really do it isometrically. Otherwise, it sticks and falls and puts a hole in your floor. I'm not doing that. So, but
Needs versus wants, Jeremy. Needs versus wants. We need to do this, so we don't want to patch the hole in the floor, but we might need to make one.
I don't need to spend money on the stupid floor when I got mice chewing up my stupid air conditioner at the freaking Lake of the Ozarks. So I need mouse poison to kill them all.
As Jeremy declares his murderous rampage against all vermin life. This is us at Karate Without Belts, wishing everybody a happy Mountain Day, which is a real thing, by the way.
Yeah.
But we're about a week late. But happy Mountain Day, everyone, and good old bull. This is us signing off. I'm John.
I'm Jeremy. Take care.
Keep on training. stinger this time is just for me to put this in the stinger. But you know what? I'm just gonna leave it in. I'm not editing this part out. I'm just gonna leave this part in because this is the most annoying part about living here. And you know what? After today, I'm never gonna have to edit this out. That is staying in the podcast. I do not care. This is the last time I have to deal with this. Either Jeremy, you get on earlier, or we just have to deal with it. All right.
Sorry, man.
If anything, the podcast is just used to vent our own frustration about life. Right?